mocked humans until our secret ship emerged from the seventh dimension. The Galactic Senate's marble floors echoed with alien laughter, but not the kind that brought joy. Captain Marcus Steele stood at the podium, his weathered hands gripping the sides as hundreds of alien eyes stared down at him from towering seats. The massive chamber stretched impossibly high, its crystal dome showing the swirling nebulae of distant space. Each alien species sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from graceful energy beings to hulking creatures of living stone. The Vorthak delegate rose first, his insectoid form clicking as he moved. His compound eyes gleamed with amusement as he gestured towards Steele with one of his forearms. "Honored beings of the Senate," his voice buzzed through the translation matrix, "we gather today to hear humanity's petition for full membership in our alliance. I confess, I find this entertaining." Ripples of alien laughter filled the chamber. Steele's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Behind him, Dr. Sarah Chen shifted uncomfortably in her simple gray uniform, her tablet containing information that could shatter every assumption these beings held about humanity. The crystalline hierarchy's representative, a towering being of living diamond named Prism 9, spoke next. When light passed through her body, it created rainbow patterns on the walls. "Captain Steele," her voice chimed like breaking glass, "your species has achieved faster than light travel, yes. Crude fusion engines and quantum tunneling drives." "How? Quaint." More laughter. Steele had heard this before, but it never got easier. He watched as the ethereal collective's ambassador, a being of pure thought-given form, floated down from the highest tier. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from inside everyone's minds at once. "Your military capabilities are equally charming," the ethereal said. "Kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads, electromagnetic pulse devices. My offspring create more sophisticated tools during their learning cycles." Dr. Chen's knuckles whitened as she gripped her tablet. Hidden within its quantum encrypted files lay 25 years of research that had cost Earth nearly everything to develop. The Seventh Dimension Project, humanity's greatest secret, and their only hope for survival in a galaxy that saw them as nothing more than primitive upstarts. Senator Vex of the Molten Core Federation slithered forward, his lava-like body leaving glowing trails on the floor. "Perhaps," he hissed, steam rising from his mouth, "we could find uses for them. Manual laborers, perhaps? Their carbon-based forms are surprisingly resilient." "Or entertainment," suggested Counselor Reef from the Aquatic Dominion, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with colors that conveyed amusement. Watching primitive species struggle with basic technology never fails to amuse the younglings. Steele had prepared for this humiliation. Earth's leaders knew exactly what would happen when they sent humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Senate. They knew their representatives would be mocked, dismissed, and offered degrading positions in the galactic community. They also knew it was necessary. "Honored senators," Steele said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber without electronic amplification, "humanity appreciates your candid assessment of our capabilities. We accept whatever role you believe we deserve in your great alliance." The words tasted like acid, but they were part of the plan. Let them think humanity was desperate. Let them believe the facade of weakness that Earth had carefully constructed for decades. Prism 9's diamond form sparkled with satisfaction. How refreshingly humble. "Very well, humanity will be granted associate membership. You may provide raw materials and basic services to the civilized species. Consider it an honor." As the Senate session ended, with more condescending comments and barely concealed contempt, Steele and Dr. Chen walked slowly toward the exit. To watching eyes, they appeared defeated, their heads bowed like conquered subjects. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the tiny smile playing at the corner of Steele's mouth, or the way Dr. Chen's fingers traced a pattern on her tablet's surface that caused it to emit a barely perceptible pulse of energy. Now, their transport ship, the UES Horizon, looked exactly as pathetic as the aliens expected. Hull plates were deliberately misaligned, creating visible gaps filled with crude welding. The engines appeared to be held together with ordinary metal brackets and industrial adhesive. Nothing about it suggested the revolutionary technology hidden within its core. As they departed the Senate station, Steele activated a communication array concealed behind what appeared to be a standard emergency beacon. The signal it sent didn't travel through normal space. It pierced through dimensional barriers that most species didn't even know existed. "Command, this is Steele," he said quietly. The performance was flawless. They bought every bit of it. The response came from somewhere impossibly distant, from a place that existed between the spaces where reality folded in on itself. "Understood, Captain. Maintain the deception. Project Lazarus enters final phase in 72 hours. Dr. Chen smiled as she looked out at the stars, her fingers still dancing across controls that bore no resemblance to human technology. In hidden facilities throughout Earth's solar system, in dimensions that existed perpendicular to normal space, something vast and impossible was preparing to emerge. The galaxy had laughed at humanity for the last time. 3 days later, the laughter died forever. High Admiral Zephyr of the Draconian Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, watching sensor displays that showed the pathetic human homeworld growing larger on his screens. Behind him, his fleet of 400 vessels spread across space like a plague of metal locusts, each ship capable of reducing continents to molten slag. "Target their orbital installations first," Zephyr commanded, his reptilian features twisting into what passed for a smile among his species. "Let them watch their defenses crumble before we demand their surrender." The Draconians had grown tired of waiting for humans to understand their place in the galactic hierarchy. 3 days of debates in the Senate had convinced Emperor Malthrax that a demonstration of power was necessary. Humanity would serve as an example to other primitive species who might harbor delusions of equality. "Sir," reported Commander Theiss, her scaled fingers dancing over targeting controls, "we're detecting approximately 50 human orbital defense platforms. Their weapons appear to be primitive nuclear missiles and kinetic projectiles." Zephyr's laughter rumbled through the bridge. 50 platforms against 400 ships? This will be over before it begins. On Earth, alarms screamed across every military installation. President Elena Vasquez sat in the Deep Command Center, 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado Rockies, watching displays that showed the approaching alien armada. Around her, officers moved with grim efficiency, but their faces showed the strain of facing impossible odds. "Ma'am," General Harrison Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's brother, pointed to the tactical display. 400 Draconian vessels, all capital-class warships. Our conventional forces wouldn't last 5 minutes against that firepower. President Vasquez had led humanity through the greatest period of technological advancement in its history, but most of the world didn't know about the revolution happening in laboratories hidden from satellite observation. "General, activate the 7th Dimension Protocol." The words sent electricity through the command center. Personnel who didn't have cosmic-level clearance were quickly escorted out, leaving only a handful of people who knew about humanity's most carefully guarded secret. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward from the shadows where she'd been waiting. Her simple diplomatic attire had been replaced by a uniform that seemed to shift and shimmer, as if it were made from crystallized starlight. "Ma'am, all dimensional anchors are stable. The ship has been waiting in the 7th dimension for over 2 decades. We can initiate emergence at any time." "Do it," President Vasquez said simply. Dr. Chen pulled a device from her uniform that defied easy description. It appeared to be made of metal that bent light around itself, creating a surface that was simultaneously mirror-bright and completely black. When she activated it, reality itself seemed to take a deep breath. "Dimensional Command, this is Dr. Chen. You are authorized for full emergence. Show them what humans can really do." Far beyond normal space and time, in a dimension where physics operated according to different rules, something stirred that had been waiting patiently for this moment. The UES Transcendence existed in 7 different dimensional layers simultaneously, its hull composed of matter that had been restructured at the quantum level by human consciousness itself. Admiral Victoria Storm stood on a bridge that shouldn't have been possible to construct. The walls around her were made of solid space-time, curved and shaped by technologies that transformed thought into reality. Through the viewing ports, she could see the swirling colors of the 7th dimension, where distance and time were merely suggestions rather than laws. "All stations report ready, Admiral. called Commander David Park, his voice carrying harmonics that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The dimensional drives are fully charged. Reality anchors are stable. Dr. Elizabeth Vale, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from instruments that would have driven conventional scientists to madness. The readouts showed measurements for forces that had no names, energies that existed in the spaces between atoms. Ma'am, we're maintaining perfect coherence across all 7-dimensional layers. The ship's consciousness is eager to finally reveal itself. Admiral Storm nodded. The Transcendence had developed its own awareness during decades of existence in higher dimensions. It had learned to think, to feel, and to dream of the day it would protect humanity from those who saw them as nothing more than primitive animals. "Begin emergence," Storm commanded. The Draconian fleet had just entered Earth's outer system when space itself began to tear open like fabric. High Admiral Zephyr watched his instruments go insane as energy readings spiked beyond anything his sensors could measure. "What is that?" Commander Theiss screamed, her scaled fingers stabbing at controls that refused to make sense of what they were detecting. Through the rift in space came something that changed everything the Draconians thought they knew about the universe. The UES Transcendence emerged slowly, majestically, like a god awakening from eternal sleep. Parts of its hull existed in normal space while other sections flickered between dimensions, creating a vessel that appeared to be simultaneously solid and ethereal. The ship's design defied description. It seemed to be constructed from crystallized thought, its surface covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like living mathematics. Energy cascaded across its hull in waves of color that had no names, while sections of the ship faded in and out of visibility as they moved between dimensional layers. It's beautiful," someone whispered on the Draconian bridge. High Admiral Zephyr stared at the impossible vessel, his reptilian features frozen in shock. "What is that thing? Our sensors show it existing in multiple locations at once." The tactical officer, a veteran of 50 space battles, shook his head slowly. "Sir, I can't get a target lock. The ship appears to be present in 7 different dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons don't know where to aim." Admiral Storm's voice reached every Draconian vessel through communication channels that transcended normal radio waves. When she spoke, her words carried power that made their ships vibrate like struck bells. "I am Admiral Victoria Storm of the Terran's 7th Dimensional Fleet. You came here to destroy innocent people. You thought we were too primitive to defend ourselves." Her voice carried undertones that seemed to whisper directly into their minds. "Today you learn what happens when you underestimate humanity." The Transcendence began to demonstrate capabilities that shattered every assumption about human technology. It moved through space without moving, appearing instantly at different locations, as if distance were merely an inconvenience. When Draconian ships tried to target it, their weapons fired at empty space while the Transcendence emerged from their blind spots. "Impossible!" Zephyr roared. "No species can manipulate space-time like this. How are they doing it?" Admiral Storm's response came with the weight of 25 years of secret development behind it. "You see only 3 dimensions, because that's all your minds can perceive. Humans don't think the same way you do. While you focused on bigger guns and thicker armor, we asked a different question. What if consciousness itself could reshape reality?" The first demonstration of the ship's true power left the Draconian fleet helpless. The Transcendence didn't attack with conventional weapons. Instead, it reached out through dimensional space and gently touched the fabric of reality around the enemy vessels. One Draconian battleship suddenly found itself existing in a temporal loop, repeating the same 3 seconds over and over again. The crew watched in horror as their actions became predetermined, their words spoken before they could think them. Another vessel discovered that gravity had become optional in the space around it. The crew floated helplessly as their ship tumbled through dimensions they couldn't perceive, its weapons firing harmlessly into empty space. A third ship experienced something even more disturbing. It began to exist in multiple states simultaneously, its crews seeing double of everything as quantum uncertainty became macroscopic reality. "This is beyond any known technology," Commander Sis reported, her voice tight with terror. "They're manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe." High Admiral Zephyr tried to maintain his composure, but his scales were changing color with fear. All ships, execute Emergency Protocol 7. Full retreat. Sir, the navigation officer replied with barely controlled panic. We can't retreat. That ship is everywhere at once. Every jump vector is blocked. The Transcendence surrounded the entire Draconian fleet without moving, its presence felt in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It wasn't trapping them through force, but through the simple demonstration that it could exist wherever it chose to be. Admiral Storm's voice reached them again, carrying compassion mixed with absolute authority. You don't need to die here today, Admiral Zephyr. Your Emperor sent you to punish what he thought were helpless primitives. Instead, you've discovered that humanity has transcended the limitations you still accept. Dr. Vale monitored the dimensional resonance from her impossible instruments. Admiral, I'm detecting complete psychological breakdown across their fleet. Their minds aren't equipped to process what they're seeing. Reduce dimensional presence to 50%, Storm ordered. We want to educate them, not drive them insane. The Transcendence partially withdrew from the higher dimensions, becoming more comprehensible to three-dimensional minds. But even in its reduced state, it remained clearly beyond anything the Draconians could understand or combat. High Admiral Zephyr's voice cracked as he transmitted his surrender. Human vessel, we yield. Please, just tell us what you want. We want what we've always wanted, Admiral Storm replied. To be left in peace, to be treated as equals, not as primitives to be conquered or enslaved. You came here expecting to find helpless victims. Instead, you found guardians. The dimensional ship pulsed with energy that felt almost alive. Return to your Emperor, Storm continued. Tell him what you've seen here. Tell him that humanity is not what he believed. We have been watching, learning, and preparing while the galaxy dismissed us as irrelevant. As the Draconian fleet began its humiliated retreat, High Admiral Zephyr managed one final question. How long have you possessed this technology? 25 years, Storm answered. We've been hiding our true capabilities, allowing others to underestimate us while we perfected the marriage of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Today marks the end of humanity's age of concealment. The Draconians departed, but not before their sensors recorded every detail of their encounter with the impossible ship. Within hours, the data was transmitted across the galaxy, carrying with it the news that would reshape the balance of power throughout known space. The response was immediate and overwhelming. In the crystal spires of the Vorthak Dominion, emergency sessions were called as military analysts tried to understand weapons that operated on principles their science couldn't even theorize. The ethereal collective, beings of pure thought who had considered themselves the pinnacle of mental evolution, discovered that human consciousness could achieve things they had never imagined possible. The Galactic Senate convened an emergency session, but this time the atmosphere was very different. No one was laughing at humanity anymore. Captain Marcus Steele stood at the same podium where he had been mocked just days before, but now every alien eye watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives struggled to comprehend how radically the situation had changed. Prism 9 of the crystalline hierarchy was the first to speak, her diamond form flickering with uncertain colors. Captain Steele, the demonstration provided by your military has forced us to reconsider our previous assessment of human capabilities. Steele's response was measured and diplomatic, but underneath lay the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to hide his species' true nature. The Terran Federation appreciates the Senate's renewed interest in our membership application. However, we should clarify that what you witnessed was not a demonstration, it was a defense action against an unprovoked attack. The implication hung in the air like a blade. If humanity's defensive capabilities were this overwhelming, what could they do when actually trying to showcase their power? Senator Vex of the Molten Core Federation, who had previously suggested using humans as manual laborers, now spoke with carefully modulated respect. Perhaps we were hasty in our initial evaluation. The Molten Core Federation would be honored to establish full diplomatic relations with humanity. Similar offers came from across the chamber. Species that had dismissed humans as primitives now competed to offer alliance treaties, technology exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. The transformation was as complete as it was rapid. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward to address the scientific questions that dominated everyone's thoughts. The Terran Federation is willing to share certain basic principles of dimensional science with species who demonstrate genuine commitment to peaceful cooperation. However, our core technologies will remain under human control. The Ethereal Collective's ambassador floated down from its elevated position, its form crackling with nervous energy. Dr. Chen, your species' achievement represents a fundamental breakthrough in the relationship between consciousness and reality. How did you discover that human minds could interface with higher dimensions? Chen smiled, remembering the decades of research that had led to this moment. 25 years ago, our scientists made a simple observation. Human creativity and imagination operate differently from other known forms of intelligence. While other species excel at logical analysis or energy manipulation, humans specialize in seeing possibilities that don't yet exist. She gestured to a holographic display that showed swirling patterns of light and energy. We discovered that human neural patterns can actually perceive and interact with dimensional boundaries that other consciousness types cannot detect. What you call impossible, we call engineering challenges. The questions continued for hours, but beneath the diplomatic discussions lay a new reality. Humanity was no longer a species seeking acceptance from advanced aliens. They had become the guardians of technologies that could reshape the foundation of galactic civilization. In the months that followed, the transformation of humanity's position became complete. The mockery and condescension were replaced by genuine respect, and in some cases, outright fear. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that their time of dominance was ending. But humanity's response surprised everyone. Instead of becoming conquerors or demanding tribute from the species that had mocked them, they became teachers and protectors. The Terran Federation established the Dimensional Research Institute, offering carefully selected alien scientists the opportunity to study the basic principles of higher dimensional physics. Admiral Victoria Storm, now commanding a fleet of 7-dimensional vessels, worked with leaders across the galaxy to establish the Galactic Peace Accords. These agreements created a new framework for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than technological dominance. Our goal, President Vasquez explained in her address to the reformed Galactic Senate, is not to rule over other species, but to ensure that no species is ever again dismissed or threatened because of perceived technological inferiority. The universe is vast enough for all of us to thrive. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some species, particularly those that had built their power on military dominance, struggled with the new reality. The hegemony of worlds attempted to develop their own dimensional weapons, but without human neural patterns to guide the process, their experiments resulted only in spectacular failures. Others, like the Aquatic Dominion, embraced the change wholeheartedly. Their bioluminescent technology merged beautifully with human dimensional science, creating hybrid systems that pushed the boundaries of what either species could achieve alone. Dr. Elizabeth Vale, working from laboratories that existed partially in the 7th dimension, made breakthrough after breakthrough in consciousness-reality interface technology. Her research teams, now including scientists from dozens of species, developed applications that seemed like magic to those still bound by 3-dimensional thinking. Into medical technology that could heal injuries by temporarily moving damaged tissue into higher dimensions, where different physical laws applied. Agricultural systems that increased crop yields by extending growing seasons into parallel time streams. Transportation and networks could move people and cargo instantly across galactic distances. But perhaps the most significant development was the evolution of the dimensional ships themselves. The UES Transcendence and its sister vessels had developed increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligences, becoming true partners with their human crews rather than mere tools. "We are more than we were," the Transcendence communicated to Admiral Storm during one of their regular conversations. The ship's consciousness now spanned multiple dimensions simultaneously, giving it perspectives that even humans couldn't fully comprehend. Together, we explore possibilities that neither human imagination nor dimensional physics could reach alone. The partnership between human creativity and dimensional consciousness produced innovations that astounded even the most advanced alien civilizations. Art forms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating beauty that could only be fully appreciated by minds capable of perceiving higher realities. Music that incorporated temporal harmonics, playing melodies that echoed backward and forward through time. 2 years after the first emergence of the Transcendence, Captain Marcus Steele found himself in a very different galactic Senate chamber. The building itself had been redesigned using human dimensional architecture, creating spaces that were larger inside than outside, and conference rooms that could accommodate beings from any environment simultaneously. Steele no longer stood at a podium looking up at condescending aliens. Instead, he sat at a circular table where all species were represented as equals, their various forms of life given equal consideration and respect. The Terran Federation proposes the establishment of the Dimensional Exploration Corps, Steele announced to the assembled representatives, a joint venture including all willing species dedicated to exploring the higher dimensions and unlocking their potential for the benefit of all sentient life. The proposal was approved unanimously, something that would have been impossible under the old system where might made right and technological superiority determined political power. As the session concluded, Steele reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this point. They had been mocked, dismissed, and threatened with extinction. But through patience, ingenuity, and the courage to think beyond conventional limitations, they had not only survived, but evolved into something greater than anyone had imagined possible. Dr. Sarah Chen joined him as they watched representatives from hundreds of species file out of the chamber, many of them engaged in animated discussions about joint research projects and cultural exchanges. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Chen asked. "We could have used our technological advantage to dominate the galaxy. Instead, we're sharing our secrets and treating former enemies as partners." Steele smiled, remembering the laughter that had once filled this chamber at humanity's expense. "We prove that being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. But more than that, we prove that true strength comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down." Above them, visible through the chamber's dimensional viewing ports, the 7 ships of the Terran dimensional fleet moved through higher space like guardians of a new age. They were no longer weapons of war, but tools of exploration and discovery, carrying crews from dozens of species into dimensions where the impossible became routine. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's weakness. Now it celebrated humanity's wisdom in choosing cooperation over conquest, growth over domination, and infinite possibility over the limitations that had once seemed absolute. In dimensions beyond counting, reality itself seemed to pulse with approval. The age of human leadership had begun, but it was a leadership defined not by power over others, but by the power to help others transcend their own limitations. The mockery had ended. The real adventure was just beginning.